This road here runs long. It's called Barrack Street. The reason it's called Barrack Street, this area here in the 1700s used to be a barracks, a militia, which was used to protect Sunderland from the French, basically, because at the time we were at war with the French Napoleon, and we had conflict in America as well at the time. So this was like a militia that was set up sort of the 1700s in the East End, and hence you get the name Barrack Street. Yeah. So as a young lad we used to come up here and you'd have Bartrams, you'd have Greenwells, you'd have Thompson's sawmills, thousands and thousands of people working on the port, and if you didn't get the timing right you couldn't cross the road for about 15-20 minutes of the local authority buses taking them all home back to the estates from where they kind of left the East End. Because if you go to a lot of the estates now, whether it's north of the river or south or as far as you can go, you'll find that a lot of people have their roots down in the East End, but when they did the slum clearances, everyone moved up to these brand new houses, the next step of living on these fantastic estates. So obviously the amount of people who were still working here had to be transported, so there was lines and lines of local authority buses taking them home on a night. And as I say, if you didn't cross the road at a certain time, you just wouldn't be able to get it. One of the sad things of that, when I was a young lad, we snot about we're a young lad, and he chanced it and ran across, and unfortunately was knocked down and killed. It was a very good friend of ours, which was one of the hazards of actually living in an area such as the East End. And this was an entrance to the Garths. This was Wee Garth. Wee Garth was more of a horseshoe shape, but in the centre of it you had the mission, where we used to go for hymns and stuff like that. And as a kid it was mainly for school outings or Christmas parties. We used it, and then as you got a bit older you used it to climb on and hang around. But it was basically the entrance to the main Garth. It had two sides that you could enter to. Used to have gates on, but once again they were all taken down for the war effort. The street corner behind us is the bottom of what we call Hartley Street, and it marks the end of the Garths down here. We had the Garths at the top end of the East End, but this was the end of Wee Garth, and the Hartley Street led you up to the top where it met Lucknow Street, which was the corner of Burley Garth and the start of a different area for as how we would see it was our Garth and their Garth. And there was quite a little bit of a rivalry used to go on throughout the year, and it was always who had the cleanest Garth in the early days, because the women used to literally scrub the steps with a white stone and keep everything absolutely spotless, and great pride in the houses that had been given, considering that came from the slum clearances that what they had prior to that. And here we have River Garth and High Garth, which they've been slightly modified over the years just to bring them up to date, but they are the last surviving structure which was predominantly the Garths that's left standing. They've actually managed to survive the bulldozers up to now. And as you can see here, we have the last remaining Garths and the verandas, which is what we used to run along. Once again, these has all been modified to sort of fit modern day living and to make them look more pleasing, I suppose. However, if you remember well, we did discuss about the candles. This would be the type of thing on the top. You can see on the rails, all them would be lit up with candles on celebrations, whether it was VE Day or some sort of Jubilee or any celebration within the East End, because the East End people took great pride in grasping anything that they could sort of celebrate, because the type of lives they lived was more mundane and hard-working people, and so when they needed to party they embraced it wholeheartedly. and we're standing here now. This is what we call Donison Gardens, which is built on the old, well, actually would have sat directly on the old St Pat's school, which was in St Pat's Garth, which was one of the largest. As you can see, the distance between each road, this is by far the biggest Garth out of all the 7 that we had, and it had a big sort of Catholic school, which was St Pat's, like in it, and Donison Gardens sits right on where St Pat's school would have actually been. This land behind me here is where Coffin Gardens used to stand. Coffin Gardens always confuses people because every other building in the area, which was the Garths, was always had the Garths name or title to it, where this one was Coffin Gardens. It was quite a small, very personal Garth, if you like, where people felt a real sense of community within that particular Garth. As I said before, each Garth had their little peculiar ways and had their rivalries in a good way, and this was no different to the Garths, Burley, Weir, St Pat's, High Garth or River Garth or Walton Garth, and they felt the ownership because it was such a small little dwelling. We stood here on the corner. This is Prospect Row and this is Hartley Street, and the building that you can see behind me is a care home now, which was formerly the site of Burley Garth, which is where I spent a lot of my youth growing up with a lot of my family. And the Garths have been pulled down quite a lot of years now, but this site has been built up. It's not in exact form of the old Garths, but the height is pretty similar, and a lot of people who belonged in the East End have kind of commented it's a little bit of a marker saying this, like, actually this was where Burley Garth was. I think Burley Garth was not the biggest Garth, but it was certainly the second and most popular Garth out of the 7. It is a shame that it's all gone now. However, as you can see, progress has to be made, and we have a lovely facility now to look after maybe some of the old people, old folk that lived in the Garths many years ago, can come back down, and if they're lucky enough to get in a spot where they maybe lived and have that view, it will evoke a lot of memories and bring a lot of things back to them.